God damn it. Just hold up. Okay. Well, after I just messed it up. Are you skinny and want to be jacked? Well, so was I at one point. And I weighed 85 pounds when I was in 8th grade. And I went from 85 pounds scrawny, insecure, unconfident to now 160 pounds jacked, lean, personal trainer, online fitness coach. I've helped plenty of people do the same. For example, my client Nick, I helped him go from 142 pounds after he broke up with his girlfriend. He was depressed. He was insecure about his legs. And now he is over 170 pounds jacked in just 4 months. Completely transformed this guy's life. And I promise you, with this video, you can do the same. So I'm gonna show you the 3 main things that you need to take your physique from stick man over here to jacked guy, all right? So this guy over here, we got chicken legs, stick arms, insecure, unconfident, scrawny, not much going for him. You know, now we've transformed our physique and we got a jacked physique. I know these abs are amazing. I just drew some boxes and these calves are so unproportionate, but whatever. This was my first time ever drawing a muscular figure. It went all right, I would say. So the 3 main things, I'm gonna flip this board around and show you. 3 things that you need to know and understand and actually implement into your gym lifestyle in order to fully get the benefits of hypertrophy, okay? And if you don't know what hypertrophy is, that is what we're gonna be discussing in today's video. Hypertrophy is the enlargement of an organ or tissue, and in this case, that would be muscles. So, the first thing, mechanical tension, all right? Mechanical tension is the #1 driver in muscle growth. So that goes above every other stimulus for hypertrophy. Number 2, volume. Volume is the second driver for hypertrophy, the second most important driver for muscle growth, all right? And then third, not that this is any less important, but I want to do something outside of just the gym, and I want to give you guys some tips for, you know, at home with the diet as well, because that is also a very, very big portion of, you know, if you're gonna make gains or not. So third is caloric surplus, and we all know that, you know, you have to be in a caloric surplus. We know that. Like, we know you have to be in a caloric surplus to build muscle, but I'm gonna break down for you guys exactly how much protein to eat, why you should be eating that much protein, and, you know, I'm gonna lay it all out from maintenance, deficit, surplus, and explain to you the benefits of each of those in great detail so that no matter what your goal is, you can achieve that. All right, so long story short, first, mechanical tension, okay? Mechanical tension is the #1 driver of muscle growth, as I just said. And if you don't know what mechanical tension means, it's basically, mechanical tension is the amount of load placed on a muscle. So in this case, how much weight are you lifting compared to your max? So if I can bench press 200 pounds, then 195 pounds for one, at the very most 2 reps, would be an extreme amount of mechanical tension. And that's great, we want that. If I'm lifting 100 pounds, I'm not nearly gonna get the same benefits from mechanical tension as if I was lifting that 190, 195 pounds, because that is so much closer to my max. So I drew this chart, all right? We got reps in reserve on the left, on the Y column, and on the X column, we got tension or weight. So as the weight gets heavier, okay, your reps in reserve will decrease and you will get closer and closer to failure. And if you have a spotter, you can even go past failure. And we'll talk about that later as well, as to, you know, when to do that, when not to do that, when to push, when to draw back. So reps in reserve is basically, let's say I bench press 100 pounds for 5 reps. And I think to myself, how many more reps could I have done before I had failed, okay? Or in other words, you could say RPE, or reps of perceived exhaustion. RIR, reps in reserve. Easiest way to put it, if I bench press 100 pounds for 5 reps, it's like, okay, how many more could I have done before I couldn't have done any more? And it's like, oh, I could have done 3 more, so that would be a RIR of 3. The closer RIR to 0, the more stimulus for muscle growth you will get. Now, we don't want a low RIR on warm-up sets, only on our working sets, okay? And we will discuss how many working sets, how many warm-up sets as well to have throughout a workout when we get to the second driver, which is volume. Okay, so as the weight gets heavier and as the RIR gets lower, you go 7, 6, 5, and then I drew a blue line at 5, okay? 5 RIR and below that, so 0 to 5, is essential stimulus for growth. So the last 5 reps before you fail are the most growth stimulating reps out of the entire set. It doesn't matter if you're doing 30 reps, it doesn't matter if you're doing 5 reps, foreshadowing. It doesn't matter how many reps you're doing, as long as you are getting within that range of 5 to 0 reps in reserve of failing on those working sets, then you are stimulating growth. As the weight gets heavier, we want to be in this red zone, okay? So this red zone is where we want all of our working sets to be, all right? Now this black zone down here, I wrote DR, that's diminishing returns, okay? We do not all the time, most of the time, we do not want to dip into the black zone down here where that is past failure, because now every rep extra that you do is going to have a diminishing return. You're going to get less and less of a stimulus and just more and more muscle damage. It's just going to be an unnecessary amount of muscle damage compared, like we've already maximally stimulated the muscle. So now we're just annihilating the muscle. Just like Rich Piana said, he said, go in the gym, stimulate the muscle and get out. Don't annihilate the muscle, stimulate it, okay? Always want to make sure that we are in this red zone between 0 and 5 RIR, but not in the black zone where we get diminishing returns. But we also don't want to be up here in the white zone where we don't have any reps that stimulate real growth, okay? And not that they don't stimulate growth. These reps still stimulate growth, but not nearly enough to make any significant gains, okay? Now that we have gotten that first one out of the way, I hope you guys understand what I'm talking about with the mechanical tension. You just want the weight to be heavy enough so that when you fail, you're between 0 and 5 RIR within your working sets, okay? As long as you do that every working set, then you will know that you are stimulating the muscle enough through that mechanical tension aspect to grow. Number 2. Volume, okay? Volume is the number 2 driver of muscle growth right behind mechanical tension. So most important, mechanical tension, second most important, volume. Now we gotta combine those two to get the best of both worlds, okay? Hypertrophy is best stimulated between 5 and 30 reps, okay? Anything above 30 reps is gonna be more muscular endurance, and you're not really going to be stimulating those higher threshold muscle fibers at all anymore. Anything below 5 reps is gonna be too heavy to stimulate hypertrophy for improved muscular size, and at that point you were just focusing on strength. So that's why a lot of powerlifters will do, between 1 and 5 reps. Sometimes they'll go a little higher and they'll do some isolation movements, but generally most powerlifters are lifting in that 0 to 5 rep range, where for bodybuilders and anybody who's trying to increase the size of their muscles, we want to be lifting in that 5 to 30 rep range, okay? So now I made another chart for you guys. You guys should honestly thank me, because I spent so much freaking time trying to make these charts, but yeah, I do it for you guys. So look, all right, we got the reps down here, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, okay? And then we got tension up here. So as the tension gets higher, so the mechanical tension, as the weight gets heavier, we're not gonna be able to do as many reps. So if we're up here and we're trying to lift like 200 pounds, we may only be able to get 6 reps, okay? But now if we drop the weight a little bit and we're lifting 150 pounds, we may be able to get 12 reps, all right? So that is what this line is indicating that I want you guys to understand, all right? But like I said, if it's below 5 in this range, we're getting no hypertrophy stimulus from it, okay? That is mostly strength gains. If we go past the 30 rep range and we get 30, 35, anything past 30, that is going to be muscular endurance. So now, not that you're not stimulating hypertrophy, like it's not that like you get 0 hypertrophy stimulus from 0 to 5 reps, just less so, okay? So if we want to optimize and get the 100% benefits from hypertrophy, we need to be lifting in this 5 to 30 rep range. Now, within each of these, I divided it up into 3 sections. Each rep range within that 5 to 30 has its own benefits and has its own pros and cons and times to perform those rep ranges, okay? So T2, T1/2, and T1, okay? Now what that means is type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers. Every single muscle is built up of a specific ratio of type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers, all right? So before I get into the chart a little bit more, I'm gonna explain to you guys what type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers actually are so that you can understand what I mean when I'm talking about this chart, all right? Type 1 muscle fibers, okay? They are less growth prone, weaker, they use less oxygen/ATP, and they take longer to exhaust. Type 2 muscle fibers are more growth prone, stronger, but they use more oxygen and ATP and are quicker to exhaust. Now, those type 2 muscle fibers are higher threshold muscle fibers, which are going to be activated either close to failure at the end of a long set or activated with a high amount of mechanical tension. That's why we have our first column, T2, okay? So anything between 5 and about 12 reps is going to be primarily type 2 muscle fibers that are being activated and exhausted during that rep range, okay? If I am squatting and I pick a weight and I fail at 10 reps, because it was in that about 5 to 12-ish rep range, type 2 muscle fibers were primarily being used, and those are the more growth-prone muscle fibers, okay? And being that 5 to 12 reps is still pretty heavy, okay, you're still getting that mechanical tension aspect. So, majority of the time, you're going to want to be lifting between that 5 to 12, sometimes up to 20 rep range for hypertrophy, all right? Not all the time, but majority of the time. The next box that I made is T1/2, okay? So this is about the 12 to 20 rep range, and what I mean by T1/T2 is that you're getting about an even amount of work from both muscle fibers, okay? You're using more of the type 1 muscle fibers in the beginning when the weight is still light, and then as you get closer and closer to failure, you're activating more and more of those type 2 muscle fibers. But now we get into T1, which is about 20 to 30 rep range. So that is where the weight is light enough to where your body doesn't need to activate those type 2 muscle fibers until you are actually within those last few reps of failure. So about 80% of the set is just your type 1 muscle fibers that you were targeting. So your type 2 muscle fibers are not being stimulated as much during a longer duration set. Okay, so basically what to take away from that. Now that we understand the mechanical tension aspect and we understand the volume, we need to be working within that 5 to 12 rep range majority of the time, and a lot of the time still between the 12 and 20 and even 20 to 30 rep range. But as long as you were between 5 and 30, you were still going to stimulate hypertrophy. Okay. Now, the third and final way that you guys are going to get jacked. All right. So caloric surplus. And I'm going to break it down for you guys, all right? I don't mean 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I don't mean 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, at least 1.6 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And I know that there's a lot of YouTubers, a lot of scientists, and a lot of studies out there that may say that 1 to 1.2 is still very stimulative for muscle growth and it's enough protein to grow. And they are right. Not that they're wrong, but there are still no negative side effects to eating more protein. And there have only been shown positive side effects, or positive effects, just direct effects, from eating more protein. And in our case, that'll be muscle growth. So 1.6 grams per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 100 pounds, then you want to be eating at least 160 grams of protein per day. If your goal is fat loss, don't worry about it. But if your goal is to truly gain as much muscle as possible, 1.6, trust me, over here. So I made a little plate for you guys. We got 20%, 35%, and 45%. All right. So if you need a general guideline, and now for bodybuilders and people who need, who have a coach and that coach knows their body, this isn't going to apply to you. But for somebody who's kind of doing their own thing and wants to get a general idea of where they should start, here's your answer. All right. So for your diet, first we would obviously need to find your maintenance. But when you find that, we're going to break it up into 3 percentages: fat, carbs, protein, because those are our macros. All right. 20% of your calories should come from fat, 35% of your calories should come from protein, and 45% of your calories should come from carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates and protein per gram are 4 calories. Fats, on the other hand, though, are 9 calories per gram, okay? So, 20% may only be 50 grams of fat. It's not a lot, all right? But fat also slows down digestion and can also slow down our metabolism. So while it is still good for hormones, it's still good for energy, and it's still good for cognitive function and plenty of other things. We don't want to be sluggish and we don't want to be slow, and we want to digest the food as fast as possible and keep our metabolism high, okay? So that everything is running efficiently. So 20% fat, 35% protein, 45% carb. We made a chart for you guys, all right? So surplus, maintenance, deficit. Deficit in red, maintenance is just this middle line, and then surplus in blue over here. So now, we've got the calories down here, so calories go up as the line continues. Now, right here, this center point right here is going to be your maintenance. If you were eating, let's say your maintenance is 2,000 calories. If you consistently eat 2,000 calories and that is your maintenance, you will maintain your weight. Nothing's going to change, okay? Now, if we are in a slight deficit, this upper red part right here, we're going to experience some fat loss. That is what bodybuilders are constantly trying to achieve in prep, where they're in a 200 to 300 caloric deficit, just enough to lose fat, but not enough to lose muscle, okay? Now, that's a good point that I want to bring up, because a lot of people, when they start a cut, take it very drastic initially, and they just cut 1,000 calories off, and then they just feel like shit, and they crash out. So, a slight 200 to 300 calories, and it's all relative, depending on your maintenance, but a 10% deficit in calories is going to get you the fat loss benefits. Now, if we dip into that 20% deficit and even higher than that, then you're going to start to experience fat and muscle loss. So you will still be getting leaner and losing fat, but you're going to experience a loss in adipose tissue as well. Okay, and now in blue, the surplus. All right, so up here is going to be the surplus. Now, we can only build muscle in a surplus of some kind, okay? Your body, you have to fuel your body. If you are not giving your body the fuel to grow, it's not gonna grow. And that is something that I had to learn when I was coming up, is I was still eating Lucky Charms for breakfast. I was still eating, you know, like a child. And that's why I remained looking like one until I actually started understanding nutrition and actually understanding that I needed to eat protein, I needed to eat more calories. Then my physique took off. Then I started gaining more strength, gaining more muscle, okay? So we gotta be in this blue range for a caloric surplus, all right? But they're still similar to the slight caloric deficit and the major caloric deficit. There's gonna be a slight caloric surplus and a major caloric surplus, okay? Now, right about there and below is gonna be our slight caloric surplus. There, we're gonna gain some muscle without gaining too much fat. And while the muscle may come at a slower pace, we're gonna be able to stay leaner while bulking. So having a slight 200 to 300 caloric surplus is what people consider a lean bulk, okay? Now, a dirty bulk would be if you're eating in a huge caloric surplus and putting on an excess amount of fat. Now, if you were following this little plate that I made over here and have 20% fat, that shouldn't generally happen. But if you're cheating on your diet, and you're eating an excess amount of fat, and you're in a few hundred caloric surplus, you're gonna put on excess, unnecessary fat while putting on muscle. So yes, you will put on more muscle in a higher caloric surplus, that is true, but you're also gonna put on unwanted fat that then you're gonna have to trim off later, okay? 3 things to take away from this. Lift heavy, check. Lift between 5 and 30 reps for volume, check. And eat in a caloric surplus, check. If you do those 3 things, I promise you, you will get big. I hope that, you know, everything I wrote down makes sense for you guys and you understand it. My name is Ethan Kendall. I'm an online fitness coach. You can follow my Instagram. I'll pop it up right here. If you have any questions, DM me. I hope this video helped, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.